Are we on the brink of World War III and Zelensky nationalizing the media? Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America.
And you ain't black.
The first time ever any...
What are you people?
We're Americans. We are Americans indeed. My name is Vincent, and I am here to bring you the news, dear listener. We are not left wing. We are not right wing. We are just right. Just messing with you guys. We've got a double header on the show. We've got two, what do you call them? News thingamajiggies to discuss, to talk about, whatever you want to call it. It's, Rich Yonkers, you were first this time. I always try to be optimistic. But what I'm going to bring you today, I don't think is necessarily going to be the most optimistic news that Middle America has discussed, but let's see if we can't figure out a way, dear listener, for us all to work it out. Shout out to Steve Schaus. I wonder if I'm pronouncing that name properly. Good to see you, 2JE. Let me know, guys, about my volumes, if it's too high or if it's too low. Trying to perfect that sound, dear listeners. So let me know about our volumes. Okay. So we've got two clips from Rising to go over, and we're gonna get right into them, and then we're gonna have a discussion and figure out what in the world is going on. I am working on another story that's particularly disturbing. Horrifyingly disturbing story, actually. But it's so disturbing that... What's up, Denny? Alden says I'm very low, so let me try to put this up. I just want to avoid clipping because my voice is carrying so much these days. Let me turn up the gain there and then turn down the masters. There's a pretty disturbing story that I'm working on. And like I said, it's so incredibly disturbing that I've been saying I need a lot more verification. I'm gonna need some more verification before I go and publish this story, because it's so completely devastatingly horrible that I almost can't believe that it's true. So keep your eyes out for that one, dear listener, or not, maybe. Viewer discretion advised. But if I find a way to actually validate the things that I'm seeing, that they're actually factual, then I will post about it. I mean, people are posting about it on Twitter, but nobody's actually shooting about it. So that makes me feel like that there's maybe some doubt as well from other people. Okay. Also, if you like the channel, people have been asking me, how do I support this? One of the easiest ways to support us is to like, share, comment, subscribe. Share the video in Reddit boards, etc. You guys know I don't, it is what it is. Okay. Good to see Mike P in the house. Good to see Izzy in the house. Without further ado, guys, let's go to the first one. This is Zelensky banning opposition media. This was from the Breaking Points, folks. Let's check it out.
We also wanted to bring you an update from inside Ukraine, some of the political moves that are being made here that are really deeply troubling. Let's go ahead and put this first tear sheet up on the screen. So President Zelensky has suspended 11 political parties that they claim have links to Russia. Now, I don't doubt, let me just read a little bit of the news here and then I'll give you a little bit of my analysis. So they say the country's National Security and Defense Council took the decision to ban the parties from any political activity. Most of the parties affected were small, but one of them, the Opposition Platform for Life, has 44 seats in the 450-seat Ukrainian parliament. Here's what Zelensky said. He said,
Okay, so we've been hearing a lot about Russian suppression of speech, and I think those reports, though anecdotal, are probably accurate if we apply Occam's razor. Could this just be Ukrainian propaganda? I guess, but Putin doesn't strike me as the type of individual at this point in time to allow for free speech in an open platform. And so I'm just saying that to balance out what we're about to hear. It appears that the Ukrainians are also engaging in forms of suppression of speech. Obviously, I haven't heard anything that is as, brutal as some of the videos that we've seen where folks are getting, carted off by secret police or state police or whatnot, shoved into vans. I was watching a Vice documentary a couple days ago, and these were Americans from Vice. They were saying, we're media, and they got jammed up anyway. So I'm not saying, I don't hear Crystal saying that right now about what's happening in Ukraine, but what is happening is they've banned 11 opposing media sites, et cetera, in Ukraine, which is obviously not a free speech type of environment. But I don't know if Ukraine ever claimed that they believed in free speech or held to a doctrine of free speech. I don't know I don't know enough about their constitution to comment either way.
The activities of those politicians aimed at division or collusion will not succeed, but will receive a harsh response. Therefore, the National Security and Defense Council decided, given the full-scale war unleashed by Russia and the political ties that a number of political structures have with the state, to suspend any activity of a number of political parties for the period of martial law. So they have been under martial law, understandable, given that it's wartime, and he is now using martial law to ban 11 different opposition parties.
Okay, so these are not just TV outlets, these are opposition parties. As Alden is saying, isn't that normal though in a war? I knew they did it in the UK and the US during war. Yeah, I mean, we'd have to know more about these opposition parties for us to have a clear understanding of who they are. Now, obviously, in our current day and age, all you have to say is this group is a Russian propaganda group, and there needs to be no further investigation or no further questioning or interrogation of the claim, because as soon as you say these people are working for the Russians, that's it. That's all you need to know. So here we go.
Now, obviously, their rhetoric is very similar to, this idea, they're Russian-controlled, they're Russian puppets, they're pro-war, those sorts of things.
Which they might be, and in some cases appear to have very close ties to
That
Moscow.
may very well be the case for some of these parties. Right. But some of them have been actively anti-war. It's mostly sort of leftist, like socialist or communist parties that are being banned here outright. And notably...
Okay, this is what I said during and this might be a clunky analogy, do what you will with it, dear listener, but this is what I said during the mandates and the lockdowns in COVID, where I said, if you allow a crisis to suspend certain rights, the government is not going to give those rights back. So, in other words, when you have mask mandates and you have mandates where the government was flirting with commanding you what to put into your own body, you're on dangerous territory. And even though I was very pro-vax, I mean, I proved how pro-vax I was. Me and Sarai got vaccinated. I canceled a very important family trip. So I was going along with the quote settled science during the entire COVID situation. But I was always against any sort of government-issued mandate, and I was always pro any sort of resistance to government-issued mandates. Because I said, anytime you give the government that kind of power, it is impossible to trust them to use that in a moral way or to give that power back. So now here we are in Ukraine, you're in this jihad with Moscow, and now you can shut down 11 leftist, communist, socialist, whatever parties, now you can shut them down because, well, they're in with the Russians. And again, I am way too far removed from that area, that region, to say whether or not it's legitimate to say that those people, those government, entities are actually from Russia or pro-Russian or whatever. I do know that there is a heavy Russian influence in Ukraine from Ukrainian nationals, especially on the eastern side of that country. I do know that. And so I know that it is extremely simplistic to just say, oh, these guys are Russian operators. But at the same time, if you were to ask me theoretically, if there was a pro-Russian element within their government, is it rational for them to say, we're going to shut you guys down until we can stabilize this conflict? To me, the answer is yes. The question that I have is, do we have definitive evidence that that's actually what's going on? Or are we taking a crisis and then using it? Because there's a difference between saying this guy's in Putin's pocket, right, versus saying, hey, let's pass legislation to stop bombing the hell out of the people in Donbass, for example. Are you calling that kind of part? You see the difference? One would be completely devoted to Vladimir Putin and Russia and trying to destroy Ukraine from the inside. Another would be there are millions of Ukrainians who identify with Russia, love Russia, etc., and I want to join the parliament to be a voice for those people. Those are not the same thing. And part of me is like, okay, well, what evidence is Zelensky providing to cut that line so that we could say, yes, those people who you're suppressing are working for the destruction of Ukraine or working towards war? Obviously, Crystal is saying that is not what's happening, because you even have some folks who are pro-peace who are also being shut down, which is obviously problematic. Let's go back.
Now, obviously, their rhetoric is very similar to, this idea, oh, they're Russian-controlled, they're Russian puppets, they're pro-war, those sorts of things.
Which they might be, and in some cases appear to have very close ties to
That
Moscow.
may very well be the case for some of these parties. Right. But some of them have been actively anti-war. It's mostly sort of leftist, like socialist or communist parties that are being banned here outright. And notably, not the ultranationalist linked to neo-Nazis parties. Those ones are still good to go. So it's a troubling division.
Again, I got to tell you, I've been very, very surprised at the reaction from certain folks during the Trump administration. Trump was supposedly a Nazi, horrible person. These people are actual Nazis. We all saw the video together. C-14, the right sector, Azov. What's interesting is the Ukraine on Fire documentary didn't even mention Azov Battalion. They were more focused on the right sector. C-14 wasn't mentioned. I mean, there were a couple of some of these neo-Nazi organizations that were mentioned. But it is very fascinating that these, quote, pro-Russian, at least one of them is pro-peace, according to Crystal. It's very fascinating that those groups get shut down immediately, or without question, but somehow the neo-Nazi factions are allowed to continue, which tells me one of two things. Either Zelensky is, well, it could be one of three things, speculatively speaking. Either Zelensky's completely fine with these Nazis and he sees more of a threat from the Russians than from the Nazis, or he's terrified of the Nazis, considering what they did to in 2014 and how we saw on the documentary where literally one of them said, if you don't comply with our demands, you're all going to die. Dude said that in a camera full of people. So it could very well be that Zelensky's in a situation where he's like, dude, 5 years ago, I was an actor in stilettos, and now, right? So it could be that he's being really intimidated by these Nazis so that he would not, disband them. Or 3, it's a combination of 2, and a good part of the citizenry doesn't want those Nazi factions suppressed, but they do want the Russian faction suppressed because Mr. Zelensky's on the western side of Ukraine. But either way, this is massively troubling that a left-wing pro-peace, anti-war organization is shut down in Parliament, but not the Nazis who, as I said, I'm working on some pretty disturbing things about what's going on inside of Ukraine. Let's continue.
Development here, and I think it matters for a couple of reasons. First of all, it matters in terms of our understanding of who Zelensky is. I've been very leery of the Zelensky hero narrative. Even if it was totally true, it's still dangerous because his interests in his country are different than our interests. So when he's aggressively out there calling for the most hawkish actions, which would in fact lead us directly into a war, we need to understand that we've got to protect our interests and we shouldn't just be doing what Hero Zelensky says. So.
I also have been extremely surprised at the almost mindless way in which Americans have made an absolute hero out of this man. And look, I truly don't have an opinion for or against Mr. Zelensky. I mean, honestly, if you really to pin me to the wall and say, come on, Vin, what do you really think of the homie? I would probably say he bit off way more than he could chew. He's in over his head, and he's caught between, I think, a basic human instinct of a desire for peace, while simultaneously a desire for self-preservation, because he's got some very, very powerful people on the far right who have already demonstrated that they're willing to get bloody if they don't get what they want. So I don't know. I don't know how much you can really hold Mr. Zelensky responsible. And I don't really know how much what he's saying is even him. And he when she's talking about he's calling for these hawkish measures, he's continuing to talk about a no-fly zone. He's continuing. I think he almost said there's going to be blood on our hands if we don't initiate a no-fly zone, which obviously a no-fly zone would trigger World War III. Most people say. I don't think it would necessarily trigger World War III, but it would definitely bring us yet into another very, very bloody conflict with a foe that I don't believe that. I believe that we could overcome Russia, but I don't believe that it would be a Pyrrhic victory. I really think they would give us a hell of a fight, and it would be terrible. And on top of that, Russian civilians would pay heavily. But he is putting all this stuff into the ether, this sort of extremely bombastic, militaristic stuff, and then he's supposed to go to the negotiating table with Russia after he called for a no-fly zone. I don't really know how that's going to work. So I don't think, I'm not giving him a pass. I'm not giving Zelensky a pass because I still think even if he's being threatened by the neo-fascists in his organization or in his country, that he should be willing to put his life on the line for them and say, listen, I want peace, but these fascists don't. I want America to come in here and help me deal with these fascists. I think there'd be a lot more public pressure on America to handle that properly versus a no-fly zone. So I'm not giving him a pass. I'm just saying I don't know. I obviously don't believe he's a hero. The whole Captain America thing is ridiculous. But I also am not sure that all of what he's saying is actually coming from him, considering the fact that the Nazis that are unfortunately ubiquitous in that country, especially now we're talking about armed conflict, that they would even allow that to happen. We continue.
I think this shows you that there is a lot more going on in Ukraine than has been presented in the media.
It's what makes it so complicated, which is that the media is casting this as a war of a democracy against an authoritarian state. I mean, yes, Ukraine is a democracy. It's probably more democratic than Russia. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have its own problems. And notice, we're not out here being like, Zelensky is a thug. You know, we're not equivocating whatsoever. Right. What we're saying is, well, it's complicated. That being said, look, the Russians still invaded the Ukrainians. So
none of this is to justify a.
Yes, Vic, we actually covered that. Denis Kyriev was he was coming to the table about 2 weeks ago to negotiate for peace. The SBU assassinated him outside of a court in Kiev in broad daylight. And then a week or so later, the special forces killed somebody from the SBU. So there's a lot of like intricacy within Ukraine. I don't for a minute believe that Putin is fighting this sort of united Ukrainian front. I believe there are people in Ukraine that actually truly want peace, truly want to settle, and would be fine with giving up Crimea and Donbass and all the rest of it, just want to go back to peace. But I also think there's a fanatical ISIS-like right-wing Nazi wing that it believes in fighting to the death. Now, I was watching a documentary on Hitler Youth one time, and they were talking about how when it was clear that the Germans had lost, that some of these officers started, abandoning the front and retreating, and the Hitler Youth kids went and shot some of the retreating officers, right? Like that was like they had been completely and totally brainwashed. So if you have some of those elements in Ukraine, if even 3% of the militarized neo-fascists in Ukraine have that mentality, then getting peace is extremely difficult to attain. And so, but this is why I've been saying this from the beginning, guys. And now Crystal has to come out and say, we're not justifying Putin. We're not supporting Putin. This is the environment we're in because we're having a hard time thinking with nuance. Saying that Zelensky should not have done this with these 11 nations, or saying that this casts aspersions on him and makes us question how committed these folks are to democracy, in no way justifies Vladimir Putin invading Russia. I mean, invading Ukraine. It doesn't justify it. It simply says this guy is not pure as a driven snow. The Ukraine has significant issues. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, dear listener. We can say Vladimir Putin shouldn't have invaded those people. We can also say there's something really rotten in Ukraine that needs to be excised and fixed. Otherwise, we're going to have consistent problems over and over again. We continue.
Invasion.
A lot of,
all.
In some ways, they deserve a lot of what they're getting. But the problem is that the media is casting this as a war of a democracy against an authoritarian state. I mean, yes, Ukraine is a democracy. It's probably more democratic than Russia. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have its own problems. And notice, we're not out here being like, Zelensky is a thug. We're not equivocating whatsoever. Right. What we're saying is, well, it's complicated. That being said, look, the Russians still invaded the Ukrainians. So
none of this is to justify a Russian invasion. All.
In some ways, they deserve a lot of what they're getting. But the problem is that the Ukrainian government itself and the way it responds to this matters less towards us and even the Western narrative around defending democracy, but how the Russians are going to signal this inside of Russia, which is they're like, oh, look, they're persecuting these Russian peoples. They're not banning the Nazi party, the Azov battalion. So they remain affiliated with this thing, which is so objectionable to the Russian people that they would then continue fighting. At the same time, if you're Ukraine, I mean, do you really want to allow like pro-Russian elements to be like operating in your government? I get it. The problem, and I'm not justifying it, what I'm saying is that the anti-democratic ends, This is a hallmark of warfare. And I think that that is why this is really tragic, which is that we are seeing both of these states descend into total all-out kind of a civilizational struggle. And in all of history of war, especially in that region, what you see is a massive totalitarian crackdown, consolidation of power, and the use of that sometimes to very unfortunate ends. You know, I'm seeing reports here about the way that civilians are being treated or prisoners of war are being treated on both sides. You know, some horrible things. And it's like, that's just simply a hallmark of war. And
yeah, I've kind of made allusions to this. As I said, the videos that I've seen within Ukraine by Ukrainians against Ukrainians purportedly are extremely disturbing and belie any sort of idea that there's a good guy in this conflict. The only good guys in my mind are civilians who don't support the cleansing of anyone, and anybody who supports movements that promote ethnic cleansing are not good people. They're not good guys, and they're not innocent. But I believe that there are millions of people in that region that are not like that, and those people ought to be able to live a happy life. Now, look, when we were during World War II, we interned a bunch of Japanese citizens in America. It's understandable that we did that, but we were wrong for that. Like, this is the thing. Saying that an action is understandable does not mean that the action is moral. And so I understand why Zelensky would do this. I understand. It doesn't make it moral. It doesn't make it right. And I think that it's a mistake to do so. In the same way that I understand why Russia would be very, very concerned about NATO and did what they did. I completely understand that. And I don't think Putin's a madman for doing that. I just think it's wrong. And I also think it's bad strategy. So I think it's bad strategy on both sides. And I think one of the things that this situation is forcing us to do is to think with more nuance about what is happening. And the other thing is, why is this not blared all over mainstream media? If you're still under the media engineered delusion that there's a really good group of people here, why isn't the media just coming out and telling us this? Why isn't this front page on CNN or MSNBC or Fox?
I'm not justifying it, writing it off. I'm like, this is what war is. Like, when Russia decided to launch this is what they have lit. And part of the issue, though, is that we're not honestly talking about it either in order to say, hey, look, if this is a war for democracy, this is not something that you should be doing. If this is a war that you are casting yourself as a member of the West, well, if you do want actual entree into the West, like, you know, he signed his EU application, this stuff can't be happening.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is all part of why what's happening in this entire conflict is all in the gray area. And while it might be morally outrageous that the Russians have invaded, that doesn't mean the Ukrainians are perfect either. And that should also change how we view our calculus. Doesn't mean we don't support them, doesn't mean we don't defend them, but they're not the most perfect people on earth either.
The Ukrainian cause is absolutely righteous.
And just.
And and just. And the Russians are the aggressors here, and there's absolutely no equivocating in that. And any commentary.
The Ukrainians, though, are the aggressors when it regards the Donbass region. So I'm not going to erase all that Russian suffering. I'm actually in talks right now with a French lady. Hopefully we can get her on the show, who's been in shot a documentary about Donbass in 2016. So I'm not going to simplistically just say that the Ukrainians have a righteous cause and the Russians are the aggressors here. I'm not doing that because that's not true. I don't believe that the Ukrainians have a righteous cause. And I don't believe that the Ukrainians, let me say it this way, I don't believe that the Ukrainian government has a righteous cause, and I don't believe that the Ukrainian government prioritized peace over everything. I don't believe that. As a matter of fact, guys, I looked at during you guys remember when Trump and Zelensky had that call and we were gonna impeach him and all the rest of it. I looked at I was reviewing that video yesterday, and there was a clip with Zelensky and Trump, and it was a very, very, very fascinating discussion. And if I could find that video, what I should have done is I should have downloaded that video actually. If I can find that discussion, I will play that clip because it really shows you what, I don't want to say Zelensky, because again, we don't know if Zelensky is really Zelensky, right? But it does show you the mentality that at minimum you could say that the Ukrainians had at the time. But maybe that's for later. But we'll continue with this video. Let's go.
About like Ukrainian's democracy is not all that it's being presented as. None of that should be construed as any sort of a justification for what's being done to them at all. So I want to be completely clear about that. But also looking at this development.
Agree, but she said that this is like the 5th time she said that. Why does she keep saying that? The reason she keeps saying that is because anytime you hold Ukraine, and you got to admit this, anytime somebody says, well, wait a second, Ukrainians should have done this and this and this differently, you immediately get tagged as a Putin puppet. You're working for Putin. You're justifying what Putin did, etc., etc. So she has to repeat this over and over and over again. And I quite frankly, the reason I don't do that 19 times in a row, although I did have a scrolling ticker that said, killing Putin should not do this. Killing people is bad. So is threatening your neighbor. But even dear listener, when I would put that little ticker up there, people would still say you're justifying the invasion. To be quite frank with you, I won't do all those qualifications because I just have too much respect for my audience. I'm not gonna lie to you. I believe that my audience can operate with the commensurate nuance that they need to operate with. And I think that most of us understand that this is a very, very complicated situation. And I think that if you say that anybody is justifying or supporting Putin from this channel, you're just saying that on purpose because you're upset. I don't think that anybody really believes that. So I hold my audience at too high of a standard to constantly qualify every statement that I make in that regard. We continue.
And there are some echoes from our own politics, like Cold War politics, the way that, especially during Russiagate, any potential ties to Russia was used as a way to smear and dismiss people, that this is often used as a tactic to shut down any sort of left-wing opposition in particular. So, I mean, he's using war to take this to a very extreme place. But you can see the echoes of the way that this is used in our own propaganda and our own politics as well. So that's another reason why I thought it was interesting here. Let's go ahead and put this next piece up on the screen of
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, again. And is it a real legitimate crisis? Yes. 9/11 was a legitimate crisis, but then they initiated the Patriot Act, right? COVID was a legitimate crisis, and they almost introduced this crazy precedent where they were flirting with mandating vaccines. Russia invading Ukraine is a legitimate crisis, and now we're using that to unseat these 11 political opposition parties, one of whom is a pretty sizable party, 45 seats, and no question, no vote, no nothing. We're just gonna do that, and that's gonna be okay because the media for the last 4 weeks has been filling your mind with this idea that Zelensky is the second coming of Christ and that Putin is the Antichrist. So when Zelensky does something that should be setting off a bunch of red flags, you're not going to see it because you've been trained to believe that he's some hot. I saw a meme and it said something to the effect of every girl has a crush on Zelensky now. Like there's no two ways about it or whatever. So he's been like exalted to the sex symbol that, oh, he's so brave and all this and, he's, all that. So now when he does something kind of fascistic, and he notably allows the neo-Nazis to remain and unchallenged, who are pro-war and not for peace, while simultaneously getting rid of a left-wing outlet, at least one of which we know is pro-peace and has been against war since the beginning. Now you're just supposed to overlook that. Your mainstream media is not going to tell you, and you're not supposed to apply any critical thinking. And this is why I'm saying, this is why from the very beginning, I never drank that Kool-Aid, because I've seen it too many times. And the minute you get all emotional and start admiring people, you start missing what they're doing, even if they do it right in front of you. So now when he's working with Nazis, people go, well, hey, I mean, he needs them to fight. You know, they'd have been in a lot better situation because of these Nazis. And you would have never said that if Trump said, I need to deploy some Nazis to help us out. We wouldn't have won without these Nazis. We would have never accepted that during the Trump administration. So all I'm saying, guys, is you just have to be careful. If the media is setting somebody up as a complete bad guy, you can know that 50% of what they're saying about him is wrong. If the media is setting somebody up as this complete darling who's just a great person, you can know that something is off. Okay, Martin Luther King Jr. had a 75% dissatisfaction rate among white America at the time of his assassination. Okay? Malcolm X, I don't even have to tell you. We only find out who the heroes are in the next generation looking backwards. It's very rare that the media calls it right, exalts a hero in real time. That's very, very rare. So if you've got a character that the media is exalting in real time as the conflict is going on and is romanticizing this person and turning them into a complete hero, you should be extremely skeptical about why they're doing that.
Actions that are being taken. Zelensky has also signed a decree that combines all national TV channels into one platform, citing the importance of a unified information policy under martial law. And if there's one thing he has been very good about, he's been very effective in his communications, with one notable exception we're about to get to in a moment with regards to our own propaganda and our own politics as well. So that's another reason why I thought it was interesting here. Let's go ahead and put this next piece up on the screen of additional actions that are being taken. Zelensky has also signed a decree that combines all national TV channels into one platform, citing the importance of a unified information policy under martial law. And if there's one thing he has been very good about, he's been very effective in his communications, with one notable exception.
Okay. Again, that's a major problem. You're supposed to be fighting for democracy over there. It's about democracy. This is what I keep hearing, especially at the beginning of this. They're flirting around with NATO because, democracy. They want to, they wanted to take part in this hostile, this military alliance that was hostile to Russia, which they bordered with, in the name of democracy. And now he's just nationalized the media. And we know that the Ukrainians are heavy on propaganda, because we know that at the outset of this war, we couldn't even get out of week one without being heavily propagandized by the Ukrainian intelligence apparatus, the Snake Island stuff, the Ghost of Kiev, etc., etc., etc. So now they want a unified vision of Ukraine. Why? Why? Are you saying that all the other outlets, all the other media outlets in Ukraine, they're all based in the Kremlin? Or is it that you want one message out? There are horrible images and videos of what Ukrainian soldiers, Azov soldiers, are doing in Mariupol, etc., etc. Is it that you want to suppress those videos so people in Ukraine can't see what's happening? Or is it, do you want to suppress that information and say, well, that's not coming from official Ukrainian TV, so you can simply say it's a Moscow plant? Because if that is the goal, then that's very brilliant, because that seems to be working with a lot of people in America. All you have to do is say that this is a plant from the Kremlin, and then you'll be okay. We continue. No, Tina. Every country does not do that in war. We've been in a war on terror, quote unquote, for 20 years, and we have not done that. America has not nationalized the media. That's untrue. Now, our media is bought out. I agree. Sadakt. But we have not nationalized the media, where there's only one media outlet that tells us what actual official media is. That is untrue. That's completely untrue. We continue.
We're about to get to in a moment with regards to Israel. But, this man came up as an actor and a comedian. He knows how to communicate in a way that lands with the populations that he's talking to most often. And so this is yet another way for him to sort of shut down any potential dissenting voices and make sure that all of Ukrainian television is speaking with the message that he wants ultimately to go forward.
Yeah, and in Israel, had to bring you this because I do think he actually significantly miscalculated. Let's put this up there on the screen. Well, while Zelensky was addressing the Israeli Knesset, he says that Ukrainians helped Jews during the Holocaust. Many Ukrainians are among the righteous among the nations. He says, quote, the people of Israel now have a choice to make. And
many Ukrainians helped Jews during the Holocaust? Like Stefan Bandera? What the hell? The people of Israel now have a choice to make. That's a I did not know that he said this. Holy shit.
there is actually a lot of criticism inside of Israel accusing Zelensky, who himself is a Jew, of minimizing the Holocaust and whitewashing the Ukrainians' role because, well, there was, let's just say, a lot going on there in terms of World War II and the Nazis. And let's put this next one up there on the screen, which is that if you go ahead and peruse what exactly the Israeli reaction to this, it's been a significant error. Zelensky has been trying, as he notes here, to tailor his speeches to appeal to various national audiences, like Martin Luther King in 9/11 here in the US, or when addressing the UK, evoking Churchill. But invoking the Holocaust in Israel was really, I think, a bridge too far, and he appears to have pissed off a significant amount of actual politicians in Israel.
This is what this is why I say I don't know how much to blame Zelensky for this. What a ridiculous thing to say. We saw the Jews get rounded up, 10,000 at a clip. We saw pogroms against Jews in Ukraine by Western Nazi SS collaborator. They had a division within the SS for the Ukrainians that murdered over 100 to 150,000 Jews. That's a low estimate. And then he goes and says, you guys need to support it. What? Of course, Saga's going to say, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Ukraine. Complicated? They massacred those Jews over there and the Poles. I do not understand this. I do not understand this rationale. But that makes me say, okay, Zelensky is just basically being, just reading what he's being told to read. I really don't, I feel like Zelensky is one of those situations where it's like, blink twice if you're in trouble. I really feel that way. I don't believe that he really thought this through and said, yeah, I'm going to go talk about that. I doubt that very, very highly. I'm blown away by the fact that he did that. Holy smokes.
To that end, especially because Israel, and I'll be talking about this in my monologue, is pursuing a strategic sovereign foreign policy here. They are not wanting to take as much, to take a significant side. They're one of the mediating partners whenever it comes to the peace deal, along with Turkey, because they have good relations with Russia. They have a huge Russian population. And so Zelensky trying to force them to take a side has had some interesting consequences. I also just have to say this because it's hilarious. Adam Kissinger tweeted yesterday that he was like, Israel must take a stand. They must make a choice. their support for Ukraine will then make contingent U.S. support to Israel. And I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, Adam Kinzinger has neoconned himself so hard that he is now like aligned with skeptical elements of arming Israel no matter the consequences. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Kind of a hilarious development.
It's a very unusual horseshoe there.
Yeah, that is a true horseshoe.
Like the neocon leftist horseshoe, that one almost never happens. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say here. I think that there were some much more effective ways to shame Israel and they do deserve to be shamed here in a certain sense. I mean, for example, the entire region has been mostly taking in a lot of Ukrainian refugees, and Israel has been notable in turning away people who are coming in. I mean, the very first day they set an extraordinarily limited, it was like 5,000 people of non-Jewish Ukrainians who were allowed to enter the country. That was exhausted on day one. And so, you know, for a people who obviously were persecuted over many, many years, and who famously, in one of the most shameful moments in our own World War II history, turned away when they were seeking refuge, to then close their
one of the worst moments in American history, in my opinion. We sent those poor people back in the, basically back into the ovens. It's one of the reasons why I'm so liberal as regards my border policy.
Doors to the Ukrainian people because of, you know, their own sort of commitment to being an ethno-state. I think that deserves to be publicly shamed. And then the other thing that is interesting here, and you can read this a lot of different ways, but the Ukrainians asked for their Iron Dome missile defense system, which we helped to create. I mean, we're like part owner in this thing, and apparently put some pressure on the Israelis as well to provide this. And they were like, nah, we're not going to do that.
Well, to be honest, I hate to say
Israelis don't want any parts of any beef between Russia and Ukraine. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them. So I think Jilly said that the Israelis told the Ukrainians, man, just take the deal. Take the deal, guys. Take the freaking deal. But the Israelis like, nah, bro, we don't want no parts of that shit. Not at all. Unbelievable. Unbelievable, this world we're in.
A lot of different ways, but the Ukrainians asked for their Iron Dome
is in order to pursue its sovereign interest. And that's what I would say that has really rankled the U.S. It is part of a broader discussion of, it's kind of interesting that all the Middle Eastern client states that we have don't do anything that we ask them to do when it comes to crisis, which may have some questions around why exactly we give them complete and total unconditional support no matter what, but that is a different discussion.
Agree. Let's put that on the table. Let's talk about why we continuously give the Israelis all this unconditional support. And when it's time for them to actually ante up, they never do. Except to go after or beat up on some poor Palestinians who can't defend themselves. We continue.
For another day.
Yeah, well, we're going to continue that discussion with Murtaza Hussein later on in the show, so we'll get back to that.
Absolutely. Hey, guys, we're going to be totally upfront with you. This is the most perilous time that we have ever operated.
There you go.
It is.
There you go. Here's Amr. Yeah, Amr. Ukraine should not shake hands with the devil. Which devil? The American devil? The European Union devil? The NATO devil? Which devil should Ukraine not shake hands with? All right, guys. So there you go. I was going to shoot a second video, but maybe I'll do that later on because there's some developments in the peace talks and things of that nature that I wanted to talk about. But you've got Ukraine, you've got Zelensky. I'm going to put Zelensky in scare quotes. I'm just going to say Ukraine as a stand-in. You've got Ukraine unseating 11 parliamentary parties, one of whom had 45 seats in their parliament under the guise of these are Moscow plants. And is there any evidence given? Is there proof given? No. One of these plants, one of these seats was, one of these parties stood for 45 seats and was a left-wing socialist communist peace party. They got shut down as well. And then simultaneous to that, he also shut down, he nationalized the media. Guys, that's not good. That's not good. Those are fascist moves that you do. And that's not something where you're out there promoting democracy. However, logically speaking, and what we know of human nature, is it crazy to say we are at war with Russia? You guys are Russia friendly. I don't want you influencing our government. Is that insane? No. Is it right to unseat all those people in the parliament? I don't think so. I don't think that that's right. I'm a big believer in contrary voices. That's why you're most likely to get a comment pinned in the comment section after a video is done. If you disagree articulately and make a very, very forceful argument, I'm actually more likely to post that. So that's the first thing that everybody sees. So my instinct is always going to be, it's always good to have contrary voices, but that's easy for me to say. I'm not at war with a country more powerful than me that shares a border with me. So on the one hand, I understand why they would do that. For all the people saying, isn't that a normal procedure in a time of war? It's very fascinating, because when Putin was shutting down contrary voices, everybody was saying, look at this guy. He's a horrible fascist. He's going to die. He's going to go to hell. This is horrible. And now when the Ukrainians are doing it, it's like, oh, well, isn't that just common what we do in war? We've got to evolve a little bit and be a little bit more consistent in how we apply things. As I said, I don't think it's irrational for them to operate from that fear. I think it's bad strategy. I think it's myopic. I think it has reverberations against democracy down the line, but I understand it. What I do not understand, and what people are saying, oh, that's typical in time of war. No, nationalizing the media is not something that democracies do in a time of war, especially in the last 20 years. And when I say democracies, I'm talking about the principle of actual democracies. We launched a horrifically evil, quote unquote, war on terror. We launched a war against the Viet Cong over there. We didn't nationalize the media. Okay. We still had Jane Fonda and all the rest of it. Say what you want about her, but she was still able to do what she was doing. We didn't nationalize the media. We didn't nationalize the media during the very unpopular war on terror. You had all these people that could say whatever they wanted in media outlets. It's not, no. People who believe in democracy do not nationalize the media, especially in the current age that we're in. If I were to say the last 20 to 40 years, America, we didn't nationalize the media when we went off to go to war with someone. So I'm completely rejecting this assertion that that's something that's normalized. That is, to me, that's just cognitive dissonance. That's people who are trying to maintain some sort of good guy, bad guy narrative about Russia and Ukraine. And so if Putin did this, if Putin unseated 11 pro-Ukraine folks and then nationalized the media, although I already assumed that Russia isn't nationalized, it would be front page news. It'd be all over the place. Ukrainians do it. That's okay. And most notably, the Nazi factions within Ukraine have not been unseated. I repeat, the Nazi factions within Ukraine have not been unseated. But the pro-peace, quote, pro-Russian 45-seat party has been disbanded without investigation, proof, trial, whatever. And some of you are saying, well, we need the Nazis. They need the Nazis. Okay. I can't make all those concessions for Ukraine. I don't think they're crazy for doing what they're doing as far as the political parties go. I think it is a tremendous red flag that they're nationalizing their media. That is a tremendous red flag to me that they're nationalizing their media. Tremendous. So I think that's a tremendous one, and I am not going to ignore that, and I don't think you should either. War on Chuck says War on drugs, war on terror, war on illiteracy, war on fat, war on carbs, war on skid marks in your underwear, war on ring around the collar, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, Tina, yeah. Well, Britain was wrong. If they did that in the last 20 to 30 years, they nationalized their media. They were wrong. They shouldn't have done that. That's not something that democracies do. And what I'm saying is, I'm not going to normalize the nationalization of a media in a modern democracy. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that just because I think that Zelensky is Captain America or Captain Ukraine. So I understand you said Britain. What I'm saying is that we should not normalize that kind of behavior for a country that's claiming that they're a democracy fighting against a statist oligarch like Putin. I'm sorry, but the minute that you do that, you've just surrendered that rhetorical device. You see what I'm saying? Amr says, even if these undemocratic actions Ukraine are doing, does that mean Russian invasion is justified? What are you saying? You're playing into Putin's narrative. There it is. There it is right there. There it is. I called it, guys. If you say that the Ukrainians are not squeaky clean and that it's problematic that they undemocratically unseated opposition speakers, even people that were anti-war, and that it's problematic that they maintain the neo-Nazi parties, no problem, and that it is not a democratic thing to do to nationalize media, that automatically means that I am saying that the Russian invasion is justified and I'm playing into Putin's narrative. Amr, I'm not even going to answer that question because I predicted somebody would say this at the beginning of the broadcast, and I said I have too much respect for my audience to even answer those questions anymore. If you think that that's what's happening, then okay, do what you will with that. I got no problem. I got no problem with you. It's a free speech environment. You can say what you want. So go for it. But it is unbelievable. 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 Alden says, I found a YouTube channel about a guy interviewing Muscovites in Moscow about the whole thing. Very interesting. It's called 1420. The fact is allowed to exist tells me a lot. Yeah, correct. And like I said, the only reason I'm not shooting a video right now on the treatment of Ukrainian refuseniks is because I can't believe what I'm seeing. I can't believe what I saw. And I have to be double, triple, and quadruple sure that what I'm seeing is actually true before I talk about it, because it's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Tell me the reason why Putin invaded Ukraine. Putin invaded Ukraine. Well, you can read. You can look at the previous videos, Amr. We've discussed that in length. There's a documentary called Ukraine on Fire. You can check that out, and you can see it yourself. What I would say about Putin invading Ukraine is the same thing I said about the Ukrainians unseating those 11 contrary seats. I understand the reaction from fear. From the human, on the human side, I understand the human reaction of fear and what fear causes people to do. I don't agree with it because I think that the human cost is too high, and that it is always better for fear, for what you're afraid of, to manifest itself instead of you manifesting what you're afraid of, if that makes any sense. Okay, I got to get out of here, guys. I will check you guys later. I will probably shoot another Middle America later on because this was supposed to be a two-parter, but my daughter's up now and I'm going to spend some time with her. Check you guys later. In the meantime, love your neighbor, take care of each other. Middle America, we are the media. Till next time, guys.